Well, Overwatch 2 is in a little bit of trouble with its community, to say the very, very, very least. Now, you've probably seen headlines all across the internet saying Overwatch 2 cancels PvE. That is literally not true, but things have changed, and things have not changed in a particularly good direction, especially in terms of player expectations. And I think overall, the image of what Overwatch 2 was supposed to be. A lot of people thought, Overwatch 2, why are we doing this? And yeah, we're continuing to ask that question, as Hard Drive just posted. Overwatch 2 has cancelled its hero mode PvE, its reason to exist. Which, yeah, that was kind of the main draw of Overwatch 2. Right? It was overall pitched as a fresh start for us, right? No loot boxes, new heroes, new maps, new modes, and a real swing into the story of this world that people really, really liked through voice lines and shit, and they actually wanted the big thing, to play a big campaign with their friends, to have a full game that they could sink their teeth into. And now things are changing a little bit, because per a stream on May 16th from the developers, the PvE mode is not a mode. It's basically just content delivered within the same seasonal style as Overwatch, just made with new tools so that the team can focus on the live service multiplayer. And suffice to say, people are not particularly happy about this across the internet. This is a crazy story, though I'm going to give it to you balanced. We're going to go absolutely in depth to everything going on, what is coming out and what is not coming out, with the help of our sponsor. Shortform, they are one of my favorite services in the whole internet. They are so much more than book summaries. Their team does the heavy lifting, adding stunning value to supercharge your learning. So shortform.com/Bellular News is where you will find 5 days unlimited access and an additional 20% off the annual sub. Take a fantastic book like Principles by Ray Dalio, right? Awesome book for like life work. So first you can hit up their one-pager on the book, and if that piques your interest, you can dive into their full book guide, where they have done the heavy lifting. They give you the key context of the book's creation. They help you understand the perspective of the author, right? And they really are not just book summaries. They're like your co-pilot. They network the thinking for you, because they will smartly bring in opinions from other books and other authors, so that when you're actually reading a book, you're getting the complete picture, right? You're understanding all those different perspectives. And they've got exercises for each guide so that you can actually apply what you learn. And I also love the fully narrated audio guides on their app. It really is just a limitless pill for learning the published knowledge of humanity, which is, I mean, it's quite a lot, isn't it? So you should really check them out. Shortform.com/Bellular News. 5 days, unlimited access. So hey, if the weekend's coming up or whatever, give the free trial. Enjoy some of the audio on a walk in your Saturday. And of course, you'll also get a 20% discount on the annual sub. All right, thanks to Shortform. They're awesome. Let's go. So, the background here. The 2019 announcement, very big, glitz, glam, and a co-op story PvE mission framework that would finally give people in-game story. The one thing that they've been craving, with really mechanically interesting gameplay. That is, compared to what they had expected at the time, which was occasional seasonal PvE stuff that kind of just came in the form of an event. Now, this was in fact one of only 2 listed features in the press kit from that 2019 event, right? And it actually took up most of the page. People were promised story missions, which was basically the same as an Overwatch 1 narrative mission, which in fairness, those were brilliant, and hero missions, which were supposed to be mechanically different missions that changed how heroes play via customizable talent trees. But of course, Overwatch 2 changed all of this. It underwent a massive pivot to be heavily focused onto PvP. And we thought, okay, this is better than the franchise dying before PvE comes out. A lot of people still felt betrayed, and the 2 in Overwatch 2 really didn't make that much sense, considering it was absolutely an Overwatch, 1.1, right? Not even a 0.5. And in June 2022, we were told that PvE would come, but they said a hell of a lot less, right? They said that it will arrive in 2023 as a part of the seasonal content structure, unlocking gradually throughout the year, and it will move the story and lore of Overwatch forward and feature varied encounters. Now, you'll very much note that they did not mention anything else there. They didn't talk about the very replayable mode. They didn't talk about the hero customization. Remember, going back to that BlizzCon, what people were hyped about was the idea of like, oh, this is Tracer. I can customize. I can unlock things. I can have talents. I can make this Tracer be my Tracer. And then I can have crazy combos with other heroes, and it's going to be an incredible, co-op game in the same way that I maybe love playing Left 4 Dead. Now it's that wrote large the hero format in a world that I care about. Oh my god, that is what people got excited about, because that is what Blizzard basically promised them and marketed to them, okay? And at the launch of Overwatch 2, we instead got a footnote about PvE that said the development work is taking place and it will roll out next year with plans released at a later date. Of course, that date is now, and we're seeing it as a part of, Season 5 and Season 6. So, Season 5, what do we got? We've got the Questwatch limited time event, Mischief and Magic Cinematic Summer Games, and then Season 6 is our story missions with a new support hero, Hero Mastery, and of course then other things happening in Season 7 and beyond. And really what's happened here is that the PvE content is now functionally the same that it was in Overwatch 1, right? And that means that development plans have changed humongously since 2019. They've basically rescoped this, they've cut a lot of their systems out. Now this is a case where it does not make sense to blame the developers. This is in the context of a live service game in an IP where clearly Overwatch 1 died to make Overwatch 2 happen, and now they've truly killed the 2 in Overwatch 2 from a broad game experience perspective, and instead I think they are getting the content that they happened to make and they're putting that back into Overwatch 1.5, this bizarre homunculus that we're now all playing that is not quite what was pitched to us in 2019, but I will say is still quite a fantastic game. It's just that they obviously managed to lose that cultural mindshare. But we still should be critical here with the way that this has been framed and the way that management have tried to sort of sell this whole thing at us. They let expectations fester like this. Now, if you've seen people say PvE is cancelled, that's wrong. There is PvE in Overwatch 2, but in a way, it's half of what was promised in the 2019 materials. We do have the story missions, but we don't have the hero missions that have the talents and all of that. Here's somebody saying, hero mode is not the same as story mode. Story mode is alive and well. So what that basically means is that the mechanical changes that required the switch to Overwatch 2 and the killing of Overwatch 1 are now essentially pointless because those mechanical changes haven't really happened. And I think for a lot of people, they just see the path not taken, where Overwatch 2 has evidently wasted years and years and years of development, incurred massive technical costs in redoing everything in the new version of the engine. And what have players got for this? Ultimately, they've got, in some ways, a better experience because maybe you prefer 5v5, and certainly the content cadence with new maps and heroes is a lot more strong, but what you lost was years of support for Overwatch 1. And I think Overwatch's cultural mindshare, which absolutely withered on the vine. Now, as for why this happened, so GameSpot's Timur Hussein took Aaron Keller, who is the game director, and the executive producer, Jared Nuss, to task in a fairly pressing interview that digs into what happened here. So we're going to talk about some highlights, right? So GameSpot said, the big talking point is the direction you're taking with PvE, that you basically aren't doing it. So what Aaron says to this is, we are doing part of what the team set out to do, but not the entirety of what was discussed in BlizzCon 2019, so the real focus is the story missions and that experience as opposed to the more open-ended hero mode and that stuff. Now, that hero mode, really your framing, your pitching of that is that it is a game that you can play and play and play and play, right? So it's not just like, you do the missions that you would get in Overwatch 1, and you'd have the harder difficulty, which would actually be, fair play to them, hard, and you feel a great achievement for doing that. But that's very different to the idea of a full game, right? You know the way somebody just goes to play a bunch of Destiny PvE for an evening, and they just keep on doing that because they want to progress their characters, unlock new things. That promise is kind of gone. Now, Timur did press in this, saying that it's fair to say that the experience showed in the first reveal is not going to be the one that will be released at any point, to which Aaron says, yes, exactly. We are definitely not doing the hero mode and the talents and the power progression system. Now, it's a bit weird. I mean, after the Avengers and so many games that have came out, we're all just like, oh, great, power progression, live service, and all that. But I think for a lot of people, having that in a PvE co-op shooter in a world that they already love would actually have been a really high-value experience, that they could play a campaign full of those story missions and then have this massive, meaty, replayable game that they could really sink their teeth into for potentially even years as more content is added. Like, that is what people were really excited about. To take another example from the Blizzard library, and I think this is a really, really important one that actually illustrates issues. So I love StarCraft 2. I know not everybody does, but I absolutely adore that game for its competitive PvP, right? 1v1. However, actually the largest mode, and I have this directly from people who are on the StarCraft 2 team, Blizzard have said it themselves, it is that in Legacy of the Void, or whatever it was, the co-op, basically the co-op, like, hero sort of based mode was by far the most popular thing. And I think that really illustrates StarCraft 2, the thing you think about is the PvP. Do you know what the thing that the most people actually played? It was that co-op, replayable with progression mode. That is what people wanted for Overwatch 2, and that is not what they're going to be getting. And that fundamentally means that the PvE is going to be a fun side piece to the proper, real PvP experience. And that means for a bunch of people who love the world but didn't want a PvP competitive shooter, now all they really have is arcade and buying skins as opposed to unlocking plenty of them for free. So I think you can see that within this framework, Overwatch 2 is never, ever going to come close to meeting its promise in the market. So Keller basically says that a year and a half ago, they reassessed their plans for the game after a really large portion of the team working on PvE impacted the development of the ongoing support for the game, right? In that there basically wasn't any, because there was 2 years of no heroes and, approaching 3 years with no maps. They were putting all their time into PvE, and that was just killing the game. Now, we already knew about this pivot, that they essentially just grabbed what they could with Overwatch 2 and shoved it into the game that we've got right now, okay? So we know that, but I think the bit here that's really quite rough is we now seemingly think that they've been sitting on this bad news for a long time and just not really saying. I mean, obviously, if they said it, it would have blunted the launch of Overwatch 2 massively. So they likely did make the correct strategic move, but, obviously, they've got to pay the price. He says, that's when we rapidly shifted the resources on our team to work on launching Overwatch 2. That's what came out last October. They realized they couldn't release a big chunk of story content like a big campaign and still provide the live service support for the shooter that they wanted, especially not when they were, launching Overwatch 2 and they had to make all the content for that while still having a good run rate on their PvE content. Quote, so we made the decision later last year we would focus all our efforts on the live game and all our PvE efforts on this new story arc that we're launching in Season 6. Then on top of that, to keep all our PvE efforts or co-op efforts invest in our seasonal releases rather than one big boxed release. That firmly solidifies Overwatch 2 as free-to-play live service game. It firmly means that there is no, it's Overwatch 2 release day, everybody, let's come with our friends, play all the big campaign, right? It's not going to be a launch day like that. Okay, now when questioned about why the resources now aren't there to make the PvE stuff, they basically pointed out that scope and stuff like that is hard when it changes. PvP, as promised, was not going to be feasible. They realized that Overwatch 2 PvE was a functionally separate game from PvP. Here's a quote, you're looking at thousands of talents to make everything just get the game out the door, plus all the content and the missions you'd be playing to get that, and it's a pretty gargantuan ask for a team. I mean, you really do have to wonder, is the death of this why Jeff Kaplan leaves? Does he just end up being like, well, we're Blizzard, we make the new game, we make the game, it takes what it takes, then it comes out. And maybe you have a thing there where the Jeff way would have been maybe making the best game, but then by way of meeting the needs of the current Overwatch community that they did have, It would have meant no support for Overwatch 1, which also would have been bad. Hard to say. I would love some of these people to speak up in the future, perhaps. So they essentially said that with this PvE work, basically, it's a big black hole, right? It just didn't look like there was a definitive end date in sight when we'd finally be able to put a stamp on it, or that end date was years away, and it no longer felt we could be doing that to our players, or we could be doing that, with the live game that they were running. And I think rightly to this GameSpot then pressed them and like, hey, this separate, this proper PvE, this was the whole justification for the 2 in Overwatch 2. Noose and Keller then pushed back, saying that hero mode might be gone, but there is still some PvE content. Quote, no, we're going to do PvE stuff all the time. It's just not in the format, right, that people wanted. So GameSpot then pressed them on the impact of PvE in Overwatch 1 and the desires that were there from fans. So they said, basically, they reaffirmed that there is still PvE and co-op in the style of the first game, right, for the people who can't get their lore fix from PvP, that Season 6 is the start of the actual narrative about the game's characters in the actual game world, unlike Season 4's Star Watch or Season 5's fantasy events that use costumes as a framing. Then with this, there will be cinematics, there will be a lore codex, but they did confirm there will be no new hero missions that feature specific abilities for PvE. It will simply be regular heroes using their regular mechanics, so yes, hero mode is dead. Here's another quote. If the variant mechanics come back and the team would like to bring them back, they would be in a different form than a co-op game experience. And they were then quick to say the development time had not really been wasted. As an example, the Junkenstein Wrath of the Bride event, that had been designed with the PvE tech. All of those tools can make their PvE modes more interesting. I will definitely say, as me and Matt sat down and said to you, Wrath of the Bride was a fantastic event. It was really fun. It was really well designed. It was full of character. Like, big thumbs up to it. They went on to say then that things like the Battle for Olympus stuff that's kind of like non-canonical, that let them experiment and play with the new tools, messing around with hero abilities, that kind of thing. And we should expect more of that, even if there is even some PvP in that. And they basically framed that there will be no adverse impact on the team working on those tools and systems. I would certainly say, for the talents that they designed, there's probably a humongous amount of work in the bin. Let's just be real, right? Now, some of those talents, they have been made. Could they recycle them back in for some reason? Yes. The tools and the tech, well, they probably have better tools and better tech. And if you now have a situation where Overwatch 2 has quite a lot of content on an ongoing basis, that is probably in large part because of the new tools and new tech that allow them to make that content faster, which is a good thing. So it is not all bad. But Overwatch 2 is, if you wanted a PvE Overwatch because you weren't interested in the PvP, but you did want that world, yeah, you don't have that. You can play that stuff when the seasons come out, but it's not going to be the full game that you wanted. Here's another quote from Keller. There's a reason why we're being more transparent here. We want to be able to give players more context into our development process, and we want people to have more context around why we have made that decision. It was going to be a painful decision for this team to make. It was really hard for us to go through this experience. I kind of went on, saying along those lines, which undoubtedly is true. They know this is a massive L. They know that the big ambitions that justified the existence of this project, that's now dead and they've had to kill it. And they are probably right, in everything that they say. I don't think that these guys are, some terrible lying corporate plants. I think that ultimately, the rubbers hit the road and a lot of bad decisions were made in the past. A lot of mismanagement happened. And when that mismanagement happens, who are the people that lose? The players and the actual boots on the ground frontline developers. That's always how it ends up being. I would say, I suppose also the publisher, because there's a lot of money that they failed to rake in for many years. So to recap then, we are getting under half of what was, maybe somewhat under half of what was originally promised. We are going to get the full story missions of Overwatch 2, similar to Overwatch 1. It will not be a full campaign all at once. We know that these missions are going to be added over time as a part of the seasonal content. Hero mechanics will generally not be altered from PvP to PvE. A full talent system with modified gameplay will not exist. Development on PvE with the hero mode seems to have been changed in late 2022. I imagine that is when the bullet went into fully went into the back of that thing's head. That's when they essentially hit a realization that with the team that they had, the resources that they had, they would not be able to make a whole game worth of content while also keeping the Overwatch 2 I mean, pretty damn grueling, one season every 9 weeks content cadence going. And the audience is now only being told that, it's season 6, which is, guess what, like just under a year or something like that. After the launch of that is when it's going to happen. Ultimately, what happened here is that management and marketing did not set up people's expectations properly. They led people to believe that they were getting somewhat what was promised in 2019. That what they were essentially doing was opening Overwatch 2. I mean, they literally did call it like an open beta, didn't they? That they would launch it like that, hey, we got some Overwatch to play now, but hey, the real thing that we've been cooking up for years, that's coming next year, big hype. That obviously has not happened. This is a complete failure in product positioning and a failure in the anchoring of expectations. I'm sure you are aware of anchoring. It's one of those psychological concepts where, in a negotiation, somebody will generally highball a number because then the ensuing conversation is framed from that higher position, right? So if you anchor people with the expectation of the 2019 reveal and then deliver this to them, they will not be happy. Especially after the Overwatch, bunch, fucking hell, if you stayed with Overwatch 1 over all that time, ouch. And then I think a bit of this is also quite damaging for them because they were saying, Overwatch 2 has seen double the engagement of Overwatch 1. With the free-to-play refresh. And I'm just thinking to myself with that, you let Overwatch 1 wither in the vine, then Overwatch 2 comes out free-to-play, and you're only, going to half your previous baseline. I would have expected more, and that is, of course, when I bring in StarCraft 2 with its co-op commandos, which was, from what I understand, by far the most popular mode in StarCraft 2 that was actually putting out pretty good numbers, to the degree where I think a lot of people working on that project really think that they could have kept on going with that because of the strength of the co-op commandos mode. But obviously, that's not happened. I bring up co-op commandos to say that there is a world where Overwatch 2 is far larger than it is right now, off the back of something like that co-op commandos mode that StarCraft had, that has that extremely broad appeal. There are so many people who like these characters, like this world, don't want a sweaty shooter. You go into some of the changes of Overwatch 2, it's a more sweaty game. Now that means I enjoy it, right? I live to get those 3 headshot pings in my tight burst as Baptiste. But that is not what a lot of people want from the Overwatch world. Now, they can, they can sample 1 or 2 courses from the menu every 9 to 18 weeks, depending on the content cadence. But ultimately, that is just some support for the ongoing live service where PvP is the main feature. And the reason why I think that's a problem is because for a lot of people, you don't want to play, say, Star Wars Jedi Survivor 1 world at a time every 9 weeks, or 1 quest at a time every 9 weeks. What people want to do is sit down and enjoy an experience. And, maybe they'll have ongoing play after that. But because they don't have that, the cultural relevance somewhat gone. So that's the situation. If you're seeing headlines saying that PvE is cancelled, they are false. The hero mode with the talents, that sort of thing, that is cancelled. And that absolutely sucks. They just don't have a big enough team to do it. And I suppose you think about, Call of Duty, where you've got probably thousands of developers. Look at all the studios. It takes 1.5 studios to make a Call of Duty now. And that is 1.5 studios a game with a 2-year development cycle per game. Maybe it's slightly more than that, who knows, but point basically is, content's really expensive, and evidently, they never had the team size that they needed. World of Warcraft is only now at a stage where it's, really getting the content that it deserves. It's actually getting more content than I expected. World of Warcraft is, I actually think, as a game, the best it has been in, easily a decade. I think this expansion's better than Legion. A lot of that is off the back of just, they have the headcount to make the content, and evidently here, they don't have that. And that's what it is. It's a little bit like saying, hey, we've cancelled all future World of Warcraft expansions and we're only going to do patches. Well, if you're somebody who loves Mythic Plus dungeons and raids, you'll be fine. But if you're somebody who wants, I'll show you a world, you're not going to enjoy that. I guess that's a bit of an analogy. Tell me what you think. What does this mean to you, your friends, your guild, the people you game with, the people in your Discord server? I would love to know. Of course, to support the channel, check out Shortform. They're a really awesome service. I use them all the time. And yeah, they're pretty great. All right, that's it from me. See you next time.